All right, let's let Helene in. Thank you, Jeff. All right, so maybe let's get started. And if people come in, Jeff, you and I can both watch for them and let them in as they show up. So just for everybody's information, the first thing I'm going to do is mute you all, and then our speakers will unmute themselves. And eventually, when we get to questions and answers, everybody knows how this works, right? All right, so let me just start us off. First of all, good morning, everybody, except for some of you who are in other time zones. Good afternoon, as it were. Thank you for coming this morning. I want to just say a couple quick words and then turn it over. As we begin, I want to thank Jewish Nevada, who gave us a mini grant that is supporting this series. As you know, this is a series called Sacred Sinai, where we're trying to introduce all ourselves to different aspects of the Jewish community that maybe we don't know about. So I thank Jewish Nevada for that. I also want to thank Deborah Achtenberg, who is on, and Deborah introduced me, at least, and some of the rest of us to Siona Benjamin's work by way of our Saturday morning Torah study. And I'm very grateful for that. Thank you, Deborah. I want to thank my cohort in crime, Jeff Gingold, who's been conceiving and working and doing the tech for all of these. And of course, our administrative assistant, Mike Stombaugh, who always takes care of everything. Okay, so when we started working on this, it seemed to me that Jeff and I have moderated the first two sessions, and I'm happy to get out of the middle of things like that. And I immediately thought that the perfect person to moderate this session for us today was my friend Geralda Miller. I think a lot of you know Geralda. She's a member of our Jewish community, a member of our Reno community. And you may remember back in the day, a long days ago, when she was a reporter for the Gazette Journal, one of her portfolios was diversity, but you may not remember that another one of her portfolios was arts and culture. And since then, she's gone on, she has founded a website in town called, well, it's not in town if it's a website, right? It's out there in space, called Art Spot Reno. That is the place to go if you want to know anything about what's going on in Reno art-wise, and the murals and the art and the Burning Man stuff and all of that. And she is also the chairperson, I bet you don't know this, she's also the chairperson of the Reno Arts and Culture Commission. So she seemed to me the perfect person to moderate this, which I think I'm still right about. So I'm going to shut up and let Geralda and Siona take it away. Please, ladies.
Well, thank you, Myra, and thank you so much for asking me to moderate this. Good morning, everybody, and glad to see you all here in this Zoom. I'm excited to introduce Siona Benjamin and talk to her about her beautiful art and her. So I hope this will be, I find it very interesting, so I'm very excited to do this. Siona Benjamin is a painter originally from Bombay, now living in New Jersey. Her work reflects her background of being brought up Jewish in a predominantly Hindu and Muslim of India. Her paintings combine the imagery of her past with the role she plays in America today, making a mosaic inspired by both Indian miniature paintings and Sephardic icons. Her first MFA is in painting from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois, and her second MFA is in theater set design from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. She was awarded 2 Fulbright fellowships, the first in 2011 to India, and the second Fulbright was in 2016-2017 to Israel. She has exhibited her work in the US, Europe, and Asia. So with that, welcome, Siona. Looking forward to hearing your talk, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion after that. And then after that, we will open it up. You can put your questions in the chat. And after that, we will have a little bit of a Q&A with all of your questions. So, all right, take it away.
Gonna unmute? Yes. Thank you so much, Geralda. It's so nice to be here. Rabbi Myra, Jeff, Geralda, thanks for inviting me. It is my honor and pleasure to be here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do about a 30-minute or so, 20 to 30-minute PowerPoint presentation. And this, as they say, a picture speaks 1,000 words. So you'll get to see some of Jewish India, some of my art, and this way you will have a lot of ammunition to ask me questions. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And I just wanted to also say that my PowerPoint has been giving some trouble, even though I have a new Mac computer. So I think I'm not going to take a chance and do it full screen. So is everybody able to see the slides, the images, okay, pretty big and pretty well. I'm not going to do the full screen because it's been locking itself and doing weird things, never know with technology. So I am a Bene Israel Jew from India. My family gradually dispersed mostly to Israel and America, but my parents remained in India. I am now an American living and working in New Jersey, but I still recall the ornate synagogues of my childhood, the oil lamps, the velvet and silver covered Torahs, a chair left vacant for the prophet Elijah in our Bombay synagogues. And there are about, 8 or 9 synagogues in Mumbai, about 3 or 4 in Cochin. Some of them are not in good condition, but one is, you'll see the next one. This one in Cochin is from 1568, and the tiles came from China, and it's a very ancient, beautiful synagogue. It's one of the historic monuments in India. The Indian government has issued a stamp, in commemoration for this synagogue. And so these are the kind of beautiful synagogues. They are mostly in the round, so theater in the round, not like facing up front. So the bima is in the center. And when I came here to the West, I used to come and visit my grandmother in Cleveland. And I found that facing up front was a totally different situation for me when I went to synagogue. So having grown up predominantly in a Hindu-Muslim society, being educated in Catholic and Zoroastrian schools. Why Catholic and Zoroastrian schools? Because it was the best English education in British influenced India that my parents chose to give me. Being raised Jewish in India and now living in America, I've always had to reflect upon the cultural boundary zones in which I have lived. So I will discuss these cultural boundary zones after showing you a few other images. Here's a scene from Magid Hasidim Synagogue in Mumbai blowing the shofar. I have a lot of photographs, and I'll share with you the book that is recently out called Growing Up Jewish in India, but this is one of them. This is my mother's sister's family. She's the lady sitting with the sari with a kid on her lap. And the entire family immigrated to Israel. My aunt now is in her 80s and lives in Naharia. She has 3 kids now and several grandkids and even great grandkids. So they all immigrated to Israel, and I was very sorry to see in a way that my family was leaving, because my parents did not leave. They did not leave because my father had a good job and my mother ran a school for 20 years and they were comfortable and they liked their big home and their servants and their cars. They didn't want to start again in Israel. So I think most of the rest of the family went because of the call of Zionism, though my father was very Zionistic and loved Israel, but also because of economic reasons. That's why they left. So here is also from my family album, my mother putting the henna on the hands of her sister-in-laws at the sister-in-law's wedding, the Jewish people in the community looking around her, and here's hands from an Indian Jewish bride. So people always asking me, why henna? Well, I say, when my Jewish Indian grandmother came to live in Cleveland, Ohio, she said, latkes, that's Polish food. That's not Jewish food. For her, that was European food more than it was European Jewish food. So, the ethnic communities around the world, Ethiopians, Moroccans, Iranians, Iraqis, Indian Jews, they have customs which are influenced by the surroundings that they've been living in for thousands of years. And Indian Jews have lived in India for about 2,000 years. Here's another picture, interesting picture of my great-great-grandfather. This is how Jewish people dressed in the Middle East, in Iran and Iraq and India. Turbans, long beards. He has a suit, and in the suit pocket, he has a Star of David hanging on the chain. So these are some of the really treasured photographs that I have of my family that are also in this book coming up. Here is my parents. Notice the melange of the mixture of, she's wearing a white sari with a veil and a wreath, gloves, and under the gloves is going to be her hennaed hands. She's wearing Indian gold jewelry, and she loved Indian gold jewelry. Indian Jewish women, once they were married, unlike the Hindu women, they wore green bangles, because just to do something different, like, they had to find their own identity. So Indian Jews have found their own identity, whether it is cooking, dressing. So it is a spin-off off of the tradition that they come from, but they are also found their own identity and markings of being different and being Indian Jews. Similarly, a lot of Jews came from Iran and Iraq, and some of my DNA says that I am, from Iran, Iraq, and, from Iran, Iraq to Israel. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, was a Jew born in Quetta, Pakistan, which is near the Afghani border. Then she came to India and married my Jewish grandfather, David, and had 10 children. So, my mother is one of those 10 children. So there is a book out right now that is edited by Professor Ori Soltis from Georgetown University, who is also a patron and a writer of my work. And he helped me put this book together. So the first part of the book is talking about the different sects of Jews in India. It's available on Amazon. It's $40, I think, and it's a really comprehensive book. And then I have written a memoir chapter about what it was growing up Jewish in India. And then Ori has written a whole couple of chapters about how all of this Indianness, Jewishness, Americanness has influenced my art, and how I continue to explore that in my work. So in my paintings, I combine the imagery of my past with the role I play in America. I'm influenced by Indian, Persian miniature paintings like this Hindu goddess slaying a dragon, which is a demon, which is coming out of a bowl. And also I'm influenced by Jewish, Christian, and Islamic illuminated manuscripts. So I do a lot of 22 karat gold leafing in my work too. So I am a transcultural artist. A transcultural artist is what? What is that? What does that mean? Transculturalism, I believe, will help in artistic and other ways to be a bridge between the traditional and the modern. This bridging not only affects recent immigrants in this country, but also Americans that have lived here for generations. So because we all are immigrants at some point in time. So people can learn new ways to communicate and have artistic discourse with each other. So what is a transcultural person like? A transcultural person for me is kind of like a chameleon, being able to change his or her colors according to the situation and environment. Today's world politics pushes and promotes a need for a sense of belonging, a push to take sides. The grayscale needs to be explored so that when one makes final evaluations, it is painted with a fairness that allows us to learn about all perspectives and points of view. So being asked, how come there were Jews in India, for example, would be better asked, oh, there are Jews in India, I knew that. Tell me more about it. Instead of saying back to the person, how come there are Jews in Poland? And I thought there were only Jews in Middle East and North Africa. So, just asking the question in a different way can be so beneficial. And this way, being American can be re-explored, and it can be accomplished by being able to see the world outside of one's bubble, outside the bubble of one's own country, race, and religion. I'm influenced also by my theater set design. I did study theater set design, learning how to read plays, make models, and finalize them in the theater. Here's Rigoletto, and here's the final set for Rigoletto. So this led me on to coming when I came to live in New Jersey and meeting more rabbis in the East Coast. They all told me that my work was very conducive to learning Midrash. And I said, Midrash, but I'm not religious, when a rabbi approached me to study with him. And he said, no, it's got nothing to do with religion in that way. It's storytelling, and it's recycling of storytelling. And once I started learning that, and it's a bottomless pit, a well of information that I feel like I'm just scratched the surface. So my initial work is influenced a lot by Indian miniature painting, like this painting of this woman sitting and smoking a hookah in an idyllic Mughal scene, in a courtly scene in India. But in my painting, Finding Home number 28, a figure, myself in blue jeans, is sitting in a traditional miniature, is sipping Coke through a long straw, which suggests a hookah. I am imbibing the intoxicating American elixir poison Coca-Cola, symbolizing the lure of the West, which draws me to reside in the US. In the background, the house says Mother Ima in Hebrew and represents the home I was leaving. There's a demon on top of the painting with a gun and nuclear weapon, suggesting that war will infiltrate and further disrupt the scene. Another few examples of my slightly older work. This is a piece called Zakham, which means wound in Urdu. And I speak English, of course. I speak some Urdu, Hindi, Marathi, a little bit French, and a little bit Hebrew. So this is inspired by a page in the Quran, but also by Jewish illuminated manuscripts. Are the swords a weapon that will descend on her, or are they a protection against unforeseen dangers? What seems like Urdu or Arabic writing above actually spells out it's unfortunate in English. So I like to mix up words and kind of have fun with my viewer and just say, oh, what is that word? What is that word in Arabic? And I'm like, no, it's not, it's English. So, people find it's kind of like a joke on my audience. And here's the bottom part, and it's her with her sari. It becomes it's irrigating the plants above, the Shema above her as a protective mandala above her, and many other symbolisms, which I don't want to get into right now because I could spend a whole half an hour on just one painting. Here's another painting influenced by this Mughal miniature, which is a King Akbar, maybe holding a globe, his hand on a sword. So by the single portraiture I had done, Sister, is done in response to the Middle East crisis. Half Jewish and half Muslim, both her hands display the rich henna of their similarities. They seem peaceful, yet in front of them there's a blasting plunger and wires that indicate a bomb that's connected to them. Will they destroy themselves, or is there any hope that they will be saved from themselves? Here's another one. I don't want to go too much into detail because I want to keep to the time. It's Vashti, like Alice in Wonderland. She's looking through today's newspaper of an overthrown chair of a dictator, the Nir Tamid, the bullet-ridden walls of a war-ridden place. So like Alice in Wonderland, she's cast out, now she's looking in, so to speak. And here's another example of, I love doing Liliths. So Lilith is based on the legends, the Jewish legends of being the first Eve, who was created at the same time as Adam. She was unwilling to forego her equality with Adam. Rebuffed, she took her case to God, who responded to her seductive powers by revealing his divine name. Thus, Lilith has been called the demoness and the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Lilith made a return in feminist history as a symbol of female strength and mystery. So she's become a feminist symbol now, with Lilith Fair in the 60s. So here she is. She can be any wronged woman, whether it is in the West or the East or anywhere, and she's asking for either justice or revenge, or she's calling out for justice. And I'm influenced in this series of paintings by Roy Lichtenstein, who is a famous American pop artist. I'm also influenced by Amar Chitra Katha comics, which are Indian comic books on Indian mythology. And also I'm influenced by Bollywood, because I grew up in Bollywood and my mother ran a school for 20 years. And a lot of the Bollywood kids would come to her school. And I was influenced and I was exposed to that pop culture a lot when I was growing up. So in conclusion to these series, and before I move on to something else, I wanted to say, why is my skin blue? And I will talk more about that when you guys ask me some questions, but it has turned blue because it tends to do that when I face certain situations of people stereotyping and categorizing other people who are unlike themselves. I have therefore over the years developed blue skin characters. This blue self-portrait takes on many roles and forms through which I can theatrically explore ancient and contemporary dilemmas. In this process of recycling and rejuvenating, they merely remind me in making the work, and hopefully my audience in viewing the work, that myth making is cyclical and timeless. That's the blue skin has become a symbol for me of being a Jewish woman of color. So I also have taken it, because of my set design background, I've taken it further and I actually paint actual dancers. They dance out parts of my paintings at gallery openings, at events. Sometimes venues invite a couple of them with me. Openings at my galleries, they will be there to present and to be there, like they popped out of my paintings, and they're very entertaining and they are dressed very elaborately, and it's like eye candy. So people really love them. Then I'm going to go on to showing you a little bit about just a little snippets of many aspects of the artist life. So how does an artist make a living? How do you sustain yourself? I sustain myself by getting many, many commissions, both public and private. And here are just a few examples. I'm doing two right now. I'm doing two private commissions right now for two homes. Then I'll be doing, I just did a 9-foot scroll for a synagogue. I'll be doing designing Torah covers for a synagogue. I'll be doing ketubas and other private commissions coming up early next year and all into the following year. So this is the commission I did for a hotel, a Marriott hotel. I did 7 6-foot artworks for every floor of the hotel. And that was a commission that took me like almost close to a year, that helped me pay my bills. And then it's finally in fall. This is one of the paintings in the lobby of the hotel. I also painted a painting along with the rabbi. We took the theme of Joseph, and I did a parochet and an amud for the synagogue in Pennsylvania, where I did the painting. Then the painting was scanned, and then it was printed on fabric with velvet backing to be made into a curtain and a table cover for the synagogue. Also, a few years ago, I designed this very intricate floor for a synagogue in St. Louis. This was also a pretty long project. Rabbi Susan Talvi went with me to India with her congregation, and we were on the bus, and she said, "I want you to make a floor." And here is the floor where I designed the floor from this design. It was scanned, and then it was made into high-fired porcelain tiles. So it's a permanent installation inspired by some of the ancient synagogues. The Dura Europa, for example, is an old mosaic synagogue floor. And, so inspired by those, this floor is in the St. Louis Synagogue at Central Reform Congregation. Here's another commission. Another example of commission, I was invited to do a commission for a 15-foot long Megillat Esther scroll, which also took me several months to do. It was very intricate. It was, so I did it in Indian Persian miniature style, and I worked with Rabbi Burton Wysotsky at JTS. And the person who commissioned me was the owner of the gallery, Moriah Gallery in New York. They both worked with me and to make a 15-foot long scroll on real parchment, and the writing was done by a kosher scribe in Israel. So I did all the illumination around the writing. So that's one, and there are copies of this Megillat Esther available that many synagogues and private people have bought for their collection. So it kind of extends itself, and it doesn't just go to the patron and is never seen again. Here's another example of a private commission for a home in Florida, and here is the painting installed in the home. I've also gotten a chance to do some furniture with my partner, Peter, who is an excellent wood craftsman. And so I designed this Torah ark. He built it, and then I painted it, and it's actual 22-karat gold leaf on there. Recently, I also finished illustrating a children's book, which is another commission where it took me 6-8 months to do. And this is based on the song Hava Nagila. The story was written by an author in Canada. The designer of the book is in Spain. The publishers are in Seattle, and I was in New Jersey. So we had Zoom meetings to do many Zoom meetings to illustrate this book, which is now available also on Amazon, along with the Growing Up Jewish in India book. Besides that, I also make art merchandise. So for people who can't afford expensive paintings, I feel it is really important for me to reach different kinds of audiences and for people to not say that buying art is just for wealthy people. So I make silk shawls and lined shawls with velvet of my art. The one to the far right is a new product where I've introduced talit. There are two sizes in the talit. There's a women's size and a men's size. The women have also bought the larger size. And so my daughter is modeling on the far right the talit, which is inspired by the floor in St. Louis. And there are 4 slits on the 4 corners of the talit where you can put there's place to put the tzitzit on there also. I also design yoga mats and other things like pouches and puzzles, and there's many other merchandise things that are available that makes it more accessible from $20 to, you know, several $100s, and that is available on bluelikeme.com. So that's how artists give you an idea, make a living, besides doing my own paintings, which I also find time to do so I can, you know, continue my own voice on what I want to do. I have several exhibitions coming up next year. It's a traveling solo exhibitions at various museums. One of them is going to go to the Jewish Museum in Milwaukee, then Cleveland State University, and then the Norton Center for the Arts in Kentucky. So it's going to be a Midwestern touring show that starts in January. I would like to move on really quickly to, let me see the time. Yep. I'd like to move on quickly to showing you a few examples of my India Fulbright. So the India Fulbright was in 2011-12, where I conducted research and interviews of Jews in India, resulting of a collection of 40 photo collage paintings. So I took photographs of the subjects, interviewed them, asked them about their story, about how they lived, what was their Jewishness in India. And then I did 40 photo collage paintings like such. So depending on the stories that they told me, what was important to them, like this older lady told me that, you know, her garden is filled with the images of her Jewishness, Prophet Elijah, but she respects other religions because she grew up in a multicultural India, and that the Hindu icons are very, very honored, but they're outside her walls. She was very staunch about that, and I felt like that was something that needed to be highlighted. This is my mother, who continued to live in India, and I did a triptych of her, me, and my daughter, because she has taught me so many stories about what it was and given me the sense of what it is to be proudly Indian and Jewish Indian and now American. And so her hair sort of continues into telling us, you know, the stories. And this has also recently affected my daughter, who has now become a chef, besides having a marketing degree, and is going to go to Israel to explore Indian Jewish food starting in January next year. So that's Rachel. She's 26 now, and she is, you know, her grandmother would be proud to see that she's going to explore some of her Indian Jewishness. Rachel, by the way, is half Russian, Polish, and half Indian Jew, but she is very close to my family, most of my family in Israel, some of the Indian Jewish family, whom you will see some of in the next project. So here is another Indian Jewish gentleman in India. So I took his photograph, I cut it out like so. I put it against a background of, in this case, the synagogue in Pune, where he used to pray almost every day. My student assistant helping me with gold leafing. And that is the final piece. So taking photos and then collaging it on the computer and then doing painting around it to tell the story of that person. Each of these pieces come with its own explanation of who the person is and what their story is also. And this is available for traveling shows and whatnot. So I've kept it together, and I hope for these pieces to go to one museum or one place one day. This is Indian Jewish bride, her henna ceremony that I photographed. And then I did a photo collage, and that's the photo collage painting. So you get an idea. This is the initial photo collage, and that's when I paint on top of that and I did a series of 40 works this way. The next project and the final series I'm going to show you, I have other series of works too, but there's only so much time and I'd love to open it up to questions. The next series I want to show you really quickly is my Israel Fulbright, which is titled From Motherland to Fatherland, Transcultural Indian Jews in Israel. So I have taken photographs of different generations in Israel. Leah is a Kochini Jew. Her granddaughter is part Kochini, part Bnei Israel, and part Ashkenazi. So the cultural mixing of these people is amazing what happened in Israel. Here's my cousin Romy and his son, who's in the IDF, who is half Bnei Israel and half Kochini, but he's married. I think she's a Moroccan Jew or another person, and he has 4 children with her. My other cousin, Leon, who's a Bnei Israel, married a Yemenite Jew, and he has 5 daughters, and these are 2 of his daughters, Noga and Livnat. And so this is the mixing of Indian Jew and Yemenite Jew. Here is Ilana Shazor, who is an Indian Jew, and she married a Romanian Jew, and that is her daughter Zohar. So the mixing of the faces are really interesting, and what I'm going to do with them is, here's another example. These are Kochini Jews. So this is a Kochini Jewish mother and her Kochini Jewish daughter, and they live in Nevatim, which is a Kochini community, which is near Beersheba. And I went and spent time with them, and my daughter is going to go there too. And there's going to be a new Indian Jewish museum being built in the same property of this moshav where these Kochini Jews live. And it's going to be a museum about all the Indian Jews, not just the Kochini Jews, the Baghdadi, Bnei Israel, Kochini, and also the newer communities of the Mizoram community, which is in North India. But these 3 ancient communities are going to come together and build a museum, and I'm helping them and I'm assisting them in trying to make that happen. Here is a Bnei Israel Jew married to a Bnei Israel Jew and his son. So what I want to do with this project is I want to make 3D lenticular prints. So if you can overlap the faces, the 2 or 3 generations, one on top of the other. And with 3D photographs, when you look at them and you move from side to side in the photographs, which will be 2 by 3 feet in size. And I made a few, and I'm writing grants to do more of them because they're very expensive to make. They're about $400 per image to print out. You'll see both the generations' faces in one face as you move from side to side. So that's what I hope to do with this project and finish it sometime soon. It has taken a little longer because this project is costing a lot more material-wise to do, but I've done a few pieces and I'm hoping to do some more once I get some more grant money. And last of all, here's my website, artsiona.com, which is my art website, and then Blue Like Me, which is my merchandise website. I invite you to look at it later. Thank you so much. I would love for Geraldine and Rabbi Myra to ask me questions, and the audience too. I'm going to stop share right now. Thank you so much.
Okay, Geralda, take it.
Well, thank you so much for that lovely presentation. I love just viewing your art, and I would love to talk to you about some of your art. On your website, you have it really separated into several series, which I found quite interesting, and I'd love to talk to you about that. And talk to you about it, your different series, and ask you questions as it relates to those. The one that I found most interesting because of identity is your series called Finding Home. And I think that that's a persistent theme throughout your work. But what I'm really interested in, and especially in looking at your art and especially within this series, is, you talk about your spiritual and your literal quest to find home. And I read one place where you said, I wasn't Indian enough, I wasn't Indian enough for the Indians, and I wasn't Jewish enough for European Jews. And I guess I was wondering, how have you found that your home? And where is that home, both spiritual and literal? Let's talk about now where you identify as home.
Sure. Well, thank you for this question. So yes, that is a question that, as I think, like, has haunted me and has, been a part of me even growing up in India. Because when I was in India too, I was a micro minority. There's the Parsis, the Zoroastrians, which are a minority, but the Jews are a micro minority. There were just 30,000 Jews at their height in India. That is nothing compared to the billion people in India. So it was always like fitting in and not fitting in. Like, I'm not Hindu enough, I'm not Muslim enough, I'm not Buddhist, I'm whatever it is. And then I'm not, then coming over here, mostly European Jews, saying, either asking me, Jews in India? I mean, how is that possible? And then I have to remind them that, most of the major religions started in the Middle East and not in the Ukraine. I mean, that, Christianity, Islam and Judaism started in North Africa and Middle East and all of those, and that Ethiopian Jews have an ancient culture, and Moroccan Jews and Jews in Spain, Moorish Spain and Iran and Iraq, has had Jewish culture for over 2,000 years. And so we didn't come from somewhere to these places. We were already there. And so just reminding people that, and just having people realize that, gave me the foundation to think that this is kind of like a little bit of my life's work, that I would be a cultural bridging, that the cultural bridging is what is important. And initially wanting to find that perfect home was my goal, but then realizing it along the journey that there's no such thing as a perfect home. There is no such thing as a home. It's where you pitch your tent. So right now, I love living in Montclair, and I love my community here and the people around me. And so, this is my home. I love my 1907 craftsman style house, which is, part of American history. And so realizing that there is no such thing as a perfect home. And the word diaspora was formulated for diasporic Jews, because Jews have always been diasporic and have always spread over the world over the centuries. And understanding and embracing that was like key factor in my work. And so therefore it didn't become like a sort of a suffering or a quest or a kind of a thing of where do I belong, but then it slowly became a sort of celebration of not finding that home. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean. I love that. And one of the things you talk about the transcultural, and that's all a part of that. The diaspora is that whole, the identity and being transcultural, as most of us are. One of the things also, you use humor in your work, and have you found that that helps to maybe soften and make people your message, of this transcultural identity? Do you think that using the humor helps most people maybe to appreciate it or understand it or not be intimidated by it?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to raise a scolding finger at my audience and saying, well, how come you don't know there were Jews in India? I want to invite them, with humor and with welcome them into understanding it and wanting to find out more, instead of being, upset about issues of race or whatever. I think people would never learn or would never want to be open enough to ask questions if you were that way. So therefore I use humor in my work, and I find it, beauty also is important. You draw the person in with beauty, and then wham, you just, you confront them with something, and they don't see it coming, and they just find it in the art. And I find that extremely exciting to do to my audience. Like they come in with the colors or the the beauty that I paint, influenced by Indian Persian miniatures, but then they see all these underlying things, and then they are they're just like stopped in their tracks, like, oh, I didn't see that. And I feel that is really important to kind of lure them in, and then, give
And
them
then
the
zap
dose.
'em.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. And the interesting thing, you talk about the beauty. I want to talk a little bit more about the blue face. And, because the blue face definitely represents identity. They are, when I was looking through them, again yesterday, and I said, oh my gosh, it finally hit me. I said, these are self-portraits. That blue face is you. It's like there's so many, most artists or many artists don't really present that many self-portraits, but it's throughout much of your work is this blue face. And you say, one of your quotes I read here, it said, identity is both lost and found behind the color. We don't share the same face, but we share the same planet, and that planet is blue. And, so I found that quite interesting. So I'd love for you to talk more about, the symbol, blueness being the symbol of self-identity, as well as for you, this, being this Jewish woman of color, how this whole notion of the blue face, came about, and where is it with you today?
Right. Like I said, I slowly turned blue because I thought, when I was doing these sort of characters, like, what shade of brown should I paint myself? Which is the correct shade of brown? Would I be representing, I would be representing one person if I didn't do the right shade of brown. So how to make it like neutral so that, it become, then I thought about it being the color of the sky and the ocean. The color of the sky over here, over United States, is not any different blue than it is over any other country. So it kind of gives a sort of neutrality. But also people have asked me, oh, Indian gods are different colored, like, even Buddhist, there's the green Tara and the red Tara and the white Tara, all these different goddesses. And then there's Krishna, who's dark. He's supposed to be so dark skinned that he's like almost purple in color, and therefore is a blue god. So yeah, obviously, because I'm from India, all these different colors from all these different religions are going to affect me. But I think the blue color, the right turquoise blue that I found for my skin is my own, is my very own. And I made it my own. It's not a Krishna blue, it's not a Buddhist blue, it's not even the sky blue. It is inspired by all of these, but it is mine because I made it the right shade of turquoise blue to represent that transcultural person of belonging everywhere and nowhere. And this constant feeling of that is always almost there with me, of belonging everywhere and nowhere, and identifying, and people identifying with me, whether they are American or whether they are foreign, it doesn't matter. Like, I have Americans coming and saying, I don't fit in and I feel blue too. Or I am like, my whole family is a white family, but a Christian white family, but I still don't fit in because blah, 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 And so I identify with your blueness. So that is the goal, to be able to find the other, to find difference, and to encourage those people to embrace their differences, and not to feel weird about it, or not to feel like I'm an outcast, but to actually embrace it and celebrate it. And I think that is what my art has helped me to do.
I love that. Embrace the blue. I know, I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking about, if I was an artist, what color would I be?
Yeah.
As an African-American woman here, and a Jewish woman, I too was wondering that question, what color would I see myself as? I'm going to have
actually,
to...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do workshops also with different groups, adults and children at different synagogues and JCCs. There is a workshop I do, which is called Identity, What Color Am I? And so the participants are given masks, and they're made to think as to, like, some people say, I'm green because I connect to the earth. Some people say I'm, purple because I like the night sky, so, and then they choose the basic color, and then they paint over it things that they want to about their lives. So it's actually a project that I do where people are asked to think like, I'm blue, you can be blue too, but what else, what color do you see yourself? Like you said, just
Yeah.
now.
I love that. That's wonderful. Another thing that I heard in your documentary, Blue Like Me, and I said, and it struck me, and I wanted you to talk a little bit more about it. And then you said, and you also said it on your website, that being able, that feeling of being unable to establish deep roots anywhere has pulled you toward a seductive spiritual borderland. And that really touched me. Seductive spiritual borderland. And I want you to describe that place for me and give me a good example in your art where that depicts this seductive spiritual borderland.
So Geraldine, in the beginning, it was kind of difficult because it was like kind of sitting on the top of a fence, like, and then you see one side, you see what somebody's one side, and you see at the other side, you're sitting on a fence, and you're like, you can't fall either way because you don't belong either side. So you're sitting on the fence, it's uncomfortable. Then you kind of like, I don't know, in a way, this thought just comes, you kind of almost levitate and you say, I don't belong anywhere. I don't want to. You come to a conclusion where you don't want to. First, you want to deeply belong. Like, oh my God, this family, has such deep roots in this area, and they have aunts and great aunts, and they have grandmothers, and they all come together as a family reunion. And my family reunion is impossible because all my family is so spread out all over the world. My mother had 4 sisters. One was in Ethiopia, one is in Israel, one is in Chicago, and my mother was in India. So the 4 sisters, after a while, almost never met together all together. They met one at a time, but it never happened all together. So that feeling of like wanting to belong was very strong. And like sometimes it just still comes about. Like I feel a little envious of people who have all this big family around them and they can just call an aunt and they'll be coming over, which I don't have. But then understanding that the advantage of that is that the universe, like so many of my friends or people, it's about spiritual connection with people, not just, you could have an aunt or with a relative and never really connect with that person. I know so many people who are not close to their siblings or something, and then you have a friend who's like a sister to you. So then I started realizing it's not about having those forced connections, it's about having spiritual connections. And that just comes about when you open yourself up to the universe. And that opening yourself up to the universe is key. And then that improved my art, that brought in opportunities and people. And once you really understand what it is, first I understood the concept of it. Oh, one should open oneself up, but I didn't really know how to practice it. But then slowly I started understanding how it was to really give in to the vastness and the unpredictability of the universe. But that unpredictability can bring in so many more opportunities than what a limited source can. And then embracing that and understanding that because I didn't have the first, not because I don't have a family, it's just that my family chose to, my mother's mother immigrated to Cleveland, Ohio, and my father's mother immigrated to Beersheba, Israel. My parents remained in India. My cousins live all over Israel. I have some cousins in Canada. I have aunt in Chicago. I have my uncle in Cleveland. So, it's just so much of people leaving because of opportunities or because of this diaspora situation, and learning how to handle that, I think, made me understand better what it was to celebrate this spiritual borderland of not belonging.
I love that. Well, that's a great tie-in to the next series that you have on your website, which is called Exodus. I See Myself in You, and where, it's all about that section is all about immigration and refugees roaming, the world, and how we're always, you talk about paradise, where is paradise? And so I guess I'm really now looking at, you also have in that section these pencil portraits. And so who are the people in those pencil portraits? Are they immigrants? And when you talk about immigration, I can't help but think about your own family, the current situation politically, internationally with immigration and everything that's happening, Ukraine, and what's going on, right now in our world. So, I guess, that section series is pretty small. Do you plan on growing that, because that seems to be another large theme for you personally. So talk about the Exodus and paradise.
Sure. So that series, I'm not a refugee. I came as a privileged immigrant here. I got a chance to stay without even, I didn't even want citizenship till early 2000 because I didn't I didn't think about it. I didn't struggle to get a green card. It didn't matter to me. And there are so many people who are destitute and want, help to be saved from their dictators of their countries. And so I just wanted to see that perspective. And so I looked at faces all over the internet, and I started off with doing little pencil sketches of these different faces of anguish. And then I started doing, then obviously those were just inspirations to just capture the faces and the anguish. And I did these little tiny pencil portraits in a little sketchbook, and they became sort of, part of the series. And then I did those 12 or 13, whatever paintings. And I did one large piece, which is 10 foot by 3 feet by, it's got a sculpture in front of it also that you can see also, installed at the Riverside Church, which was in a show. So you can see the whole piece with the front sculpture in front of it. A few years ago. And so I started doing these series of works to talk about refugees, what it is to, again, that same feeling of not belonging and what their perspective was. Even though I'm not one of those destitute refugees, I just wanted to try to attempt to try to put myself in their shoes to see what it was and to present their picture in some way or form. I will continue to do some of them as and when I feel like it, but I feel like it's a small series of 12 works with one big work. And, I think sometimes you come to a series where, you've said enough, but then sometimes in a little later, some more comes out of it, so you never know. It was just a series which is based talking from a refugee point of view and trying to understand that.
Well, I'm very curious as to why you included Tupac Shakur in that series. So tell me about that.
Yeah, that's a little bizarre, I know. I put it in there and it's there. I think it was I wanted, I was taken up by Tupac at that time because my daughter's boyfriend, who's part African-American, he was telling me about rap singers and Tupac and the story of Tupac. And I knew about it, but then I was like, I thought of Tupac as, it's a little removed from the series, I understand, but I think Tupac was killed, was shot. He was always like people of color like that are mistaken to not being American and, being the other, in spite of the fact that they are, actually really American and they came here not by choice, but they were brought here. And then they have to suffer because of that anyway. And so I just wanted to, that's an odd piece thrown in there, I know, but I kind of put it in there because of the style of the painting, and I did it around that time. But I felt Tupac was this misunderstood character of even though he was American, he was very often people that are treated like they're not American, like they're outsiders. And so here I painted him blue, also, and I made him most of the refugees in the work are actually brown skinned, like if you look in the bigger pieces. And then the angels and the demons in the bigger piece are blue skinned. Okay, but the refugees are this kind of like mud streaked kind of skin, where having, you know, walked long distances. But Tupac is blue because he's sort of like more like my character. He's sort of the other, and he's there. And so, yeah, he's sort of an odd piece in that series, but I just did it around that time because I felt like I wanted to put in something about an American who's not considered an American, and then he was shot, and the tragic, you know, stories of some of these kinds of people when they are misunderstood.
Right, love it. Well, in the last series that I really wanted to kind of talk about briefly before we go into Q&A, you know, is closer to home. It's called Circle of Introspection, which is your series of mandalas in response to COVID. And so, you know, I'd love for you to talk about this series. You know, we still are in the midst of, you know, this pandemic, but why did you choose these mandalas and for this, you know, for this series of work versus going even more personal with, you know, your imagery of blue people, or, you know, we're using people. You stuck to the mandala as for that. Love for you to talk about that.
Yeah, well, there are some blue people in there side of the mandala. Yeah, so the characters are there still hovering around, either blowing the mandala or, you know, the face, or just so this series in the beginning, if you remember when this COVID just started, that's that image of that spiky coronavirus thing with those horrible things peeking, you know, the circle was like a negative circle. It was scary. It was weird. It was just like, you know, this kind of virus thing, you know, and it was a circle. So around that time, I was taking some classes with, in London, there is a online classes they had, and I had done some of it before too. I had taken some classes with of Islamic geometrical drawings. And so I was doing some of those with them during the pandemic. And I thought, I want to make a small series of positive circles in reaction to this negative corona circle. So it sort of was cathartic for me to kind of do these beautiful positive mandala circles and then put my blue people around it, you know, as a reaction to the negative corona circular virus, creepy, horrible thing. That was kind of scary.
And then you talk about, and you mentioned like with that, the power of art. You know, I've always said that art, you know, is healing, and you know, and we found that especially, I saw that especially during this pandemic, how people really need art, and there's so much power with it. You know, have you also during this time, have you found that as well?
Yes, I have the last pandemic years, unlike some people, like, you know, restaurants and Broadway people and all that stuff, these 2 years have been the most productive and lucrative, and people just have swarmed in giving me commissions because I guess they stayed home and looked at their bare walls, or, you know, and decided like they need something. So, I mean, this is like as part of the introspection of people that this pandemic has forced people to do. And so they started thinking about things like art and what they want and positive things they want in their life. So this, knock on wood, this has been like the 2 most busy years of like, I have commissions for the next 1.5 years now, and I did all through the pandemic.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for answering all my questions and having this wonderful discussion. And so now, Jeff and Myra, let's open it up for questions from the participants, the group.
Right. I see that Deborah has a question, and I think she gets privileged because she brought Siona to our attention. So Deborah, you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, I want to start by just saying how much I love your work. Your work is, first of all, so beautiful. Every single one is beautiful, and every single one is fascinating with many facets, many symbols. Everyone is different, and I could ask you a question about every one. I could ask you several questions about every one. But it just, and it resonates with me very much, your sense of identity. I got interested in your work because I've been featuring art for our Torah study group, in which we're very slowly reading Genesis line by line, Bereshit. And I've been trying to find contemporary art that represents the passages we're looking at. And that's how I got interested in your work. But I'm also interested in my own work in philosophy, and I'm working on some writing about Jewish identity and various philosophers in Europe and North Africa. And so I wanted to ask about blue as well. I guess everyone asks you about blue, and Geralda has done such a wonderful job with that. But one of the things I love is, in trying to convey this to our congregation when I send out the art, I try to figure out what's going on. And the blue seems to stand for so many things, which I think is wonderful. And that seems to be a characteristic of your work, that, blue stands for the universal because of the sky and the sea, which is everywhere. And it stands for Hindu Jewishness, the blue,
the talit,
the blue and the talit. Yeah, I noticed in some of them, there's the blue seems to stand for Hindu, but then the person also has on a sari talit that has blue stripes. And so your sense that I see myself in you, so I'm not separate from you, and one symbol is not just about one thing, is one thing I wanted to ask you about. And then I'll just say one other thing, and you can say whatever you want about both of them. Since I've been, doing things related to Torah, I've been looking specifically at the ones you do related to Torah, and I think you're a great midrashist as well. You haven't talked about that, but you are a midrashist. Your interpretations of each one of these are so rich, and I especially absolutely adore the four mothers who entered Pardes, which is just an incredibly rich kind of midrash. So, and I noticed even in the Coming Home series, you have, Sarah and Abraham as part of that series as well. So if you wanted to say something about any of that. And again, I just really think your work is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deborah. I really appreciate these comments. I love Midrash. I think Midrash I've just scratched the surface. I've studied with several rabbis, Rabbi Susan Talvi for the floor, Rabbi Jeremy Gerber for the most recent project we did about the Holocaust. Several rabbis that I have studied with about Midrash over the years have taught me so much about how to take from the stories of the Torah and how to be a visual Midrash interpreter. So, and I would say, I would tell Rabbi Burton Vysotsky, oh, you're a scholar, I don't know that much. And he'd be like, no, as you learn, you can interpret. It's okay, So we would tackle stories, or like when I did the Megalith Esther and took his help, he told me so many more insights as to how to bring out the iconography, you could go off on, like, if you take the character of Miriam, for example, she's the sister of Moses and Aaron, and, so many symbols. She comes with the tambourine, dancing, and then she was the woman who asked the question to God, and then she gets that skin disease for 7 days and is confined to a tent. And then, but when Aaron asked the question, nothing happens to him. And, why does she get that? And why is she more vulnerable that way? And, is it a patriarchal society that makes that, kind of come about, and how does she rise from the strength? And so from with strength from that. So Miriam has then, like, for example, there's one painting that I just sold actually to a doctor in Pennsylvania. It's Miriam with a bag, it's number 77, finding on number 77. And she's got the green sari, which becomes a talit, and she's holding a suitcase, and she's, walking, and her other hand becomes a tefillin, which becomes the tree of life.
Yeah.
And then so she becomes, she is the character that led people out of bondage and into Israel, dancing with her tambourine. So therefore she becomes a symbol of leading people out of anything.
Right.
And so then she's now taking my Indian Jewish people from India to Israel, maybe, or she's taking people out of any bondage into freedom.
Right.
And she's got her suitcase with her paraphernalia. She's moving to another country. She's an immigrant like me and you and everybody else. And so she's got her suitcase, and she's got her tradition, which is her green sari, but it becomes part of her other heritage, which is a talit, which, then the threads of the talit tell all different kinds of tales and whatnot. So there's so many things that can be explored. Right now I'm doing a commission for a CEO of Coca-Cola and his private home, and it's about Rachel and Rebecca, because his wife's name is Rachel and his daughter's name is Rebecca. And so the common symbols are what? Well, water, tikkun ha'olam, pot, but he wanted them to be like, and Rachel and Rebecca really never meet, because Rachel is Rebecca's daughter-in-law, the wife of Jacob. And so, but now in this painting they meet, and Rebecca offers her this lotus flower, and this lotus flower symbolizes the fact that Rebecca was always the decision maker. She made things happen. She decided that Jacob was going to be the father of the 12 tribes and not Esau, her other older son, who actually deserved the blessing more than Jacob did. But she's like the manipulator in the story. And so I've made her sort of the decisive person in the character. And then Rachel is Jacob's wife, and how her sari also turns into a talit, but then the tzitzit becomes a ladder to symbolize Jacob's ladder and his dream. So, things like that, kind of one thing leads to another. And so there are many layers of interpretation along with the layers of color. And, that happen, that make it exciting. And as I go in the painting, sometimes more and more iconography and symbolism can come up, and I can add it, or I can decide some from the beginning and say, what is the basic layout? For example, in this painting.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. There's so much in what you said. I really think your work is great midrash in the strict sense of extending the meaning, and it's very rich, and it's very beautiful, and it's very engaging, and I just want to thank you for that.
Thanks. Edna, I see your question in the chat. Do you want to ask it, or do you want me just to read it, babe? Where are you?
I have here.
Yeah, go ahead and ask it.
Yeah, I was wondering about the blue color that you use in relation, whether or not it has any relation to the afterlife in terms of how you use it, or in terms of visions.
I suppose, like all artists, it comes from the subconscious. So there might be connections to answering questions like what you just said, afterlife, or, I mean, it is a vision of mine, in many ways, right? That I see, like, who's blue skinned, but I am, so can't you see? I mean, so it's a vision of the artist that you have to make into reality in your work, right?
It may seem like a foolish question. I know of one other artist who uses blue, who is I don't know if you know of him or not, but he's an artist. He's no longer living. He's from Louisiana. And he paints he painted blue dogs. And that was based on his grief over loss of his pet. And this helped him resolve some of that grief. And that
Wait,
was,
blue, yeah, blue is a celestial kind of color anyway, you know, it's kind of the universe and the sky and the heavens. So I guess it could be connected in that way. Like I said, it's connected to me to the sky also. So
yes,
it's heavenly, so to speak, you know, a little bit.
thank you.
Somebody else was asking me about Cleveland. Have you
Yeah.
talked this person?
Yeah, that was Helene. You want to answer that?
Yeah. I can see the question. Does Helene want to ask it or should I just answer it?
Helene? Go ahead and answer it.
Okay.
Could read it to us maybe.
Yeah. Have you given a talk or been shown in Cleveland? And what synagogue did your grandma belong to, if any, in Cleveland? That was interesting, I found. Well, as a matter of fact, in January 2023, I will have a solo show at Cleveland State University, Art Galleries, because it's traveling all next year from several venues, and it will be in Cleveland State University Art Galleries. They have a beautiful gallery in January, that semester of January 2023. That's the question, first question to answer. My grandmother is buried at a Jewish cemetery in Cleveland. So is her son, my uncle, who recently died. And I think she, my uncle lived in Shaker Heights, and I think I've gone to Park Synagogue with them, Park Synagogue, the big synagogue, and one other one, also I forget the name, and she's buried in a Jewish cemetery in Cleveland. And when I go to Cleveland, I will, go and see her grave when I visit there for my exhibition. So yeah, my mother's mother, who was born in Quetta, Pakistan, lived a lot of her life in Pune and Mumbai and in India, and had 10 children there. Then all her 10 children dispersed. And then she left with her son, Mordecai, to come live in Cleveland the last few years of her life, and died in Cleveland. So she's had a very spread out diasporic life too. I mean, from Quetta to India to Cleveland.
Thanks. Laura or Chris, I'm not sure which one of you the hand is. You want to
Yeah, it's Chris. Siona, I throughout this whole talk and also looking at your wonderful work, I'm very struck by the way you somehow, with your wonderfully creative mind and your intellect, are able to take scary and frightening things such as that COVID image, and like turn it into a mandala, and take things that are negative and frightening for all of us and turn them into something positive. You do that over and over and over. You take the experience of being in a diaspora and sitting on a fence and saying, well, hey, I don't want to be on either side. I want to be above all of it. And over and over. And I'm just curious, where do you spring from? What gives you that source, that energy? How do you do that? I love it that you do that.
That's a very interesting question. No, almost never been asked. This very, very unique question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is my mother. My mother was extremely, and my father too, but my mother more. Like my father was, he was very positive and wonderful and very supportive, but my mother had this, she was a force of nature, and she had this energy that, it's unreal. Like if anything wrong happened, like, yeah, you pray to God or you say your Shema, or you say, but I would call her up first and I would tell her, this is what's wrong. And she would say, it's going to be okay. And you're going to turn it around. And that kind of reinforcement that she's given me all my life has taught me to try to take every possible scenario to turn it around. Because she was very much like that. She has been confronted with many situations in life, and she's had a good life. and a positive, wonderful life. And she came, visited me very often, and she had a very strong influence on my daughter too, Rachel. Like she was there when my daughter was born, and she stayed with us for several months too. And that was really amazing. And she was a very amazing force and like my angel in a way. And I can say that she taught me this way of thinking. To the extent I want to mention one thing, my daughter, who is now 26, and when she was very little, and she would spend a lot of time with her grandmother because she used to come pretty often and spend several months, and family, I mean, she's very wonderful to be around and very unintrusive, to have in the house. My daughter was very close to her. They were like two peas in a pod. And once my daughter comes to me and says, grandma can strike lightning. And I said, what? And she said, yeah, it's good lightning, but she can really strike lightning. She knows how to do that. So that kind of power that my mother had, which I don't even think I have, even though I'm trying to do it in my work, is different. I don't know how to explain it. And I think she was a special kind of person. And and many people saw that in her too. She was also physically very beautiful. That helped. And so, when she would come to my school and my friends would say, is your mom like a movie star or something? She had this sort of radiance about her. So I think that she carried that positivity with her and that way to turn things around, if that answers your question and if it makes sense to you.
It does. It very much does. Thank you so much. I also flashed on when you were just answering me, I flashed on a painting that maybe you've already done this of your mother holding lightning.
Yeah, that would be, well, my mother is in some works. Actually, recently, after grudgingly, I did sell one of my pieces. There's Finding Home number 30 in my website, was something that my daughter and me thought we would never sell because my father and mother were at the bottom of the painting. And then me sitting in Elijah's chariot with a book in my hand, flying and going to my new home in America with my husband and my daughter waiting for me on the other side. And I thought I would never sell the painting till a buyer in Canada pleaded with me and said, please, we really want, that's the only one we want. And we will look after it. And we are big art collectors. And so they have it now. And so she's in some paintings like that, few of them, but she's also in the essence of some others. Like there's one other painting, which is called Finding Home number 52. And it shows a dancing woman with like arms spread out like that. And the skirt is like spread out and she's looking upwards, her eyes are closed. And there are these, through the border of the painting, there are these bombs coming through, right? And they kind of are evident in the border, but when they come through, they kind of become transparent or they become like a border. And people have come up to me and said two different versions. So it depends on how the person thinks. People have come up to me and said, she doesn't know what's coming at her. So she's oblivious of what's the destruction that's coming at her because these bombs are coming at her. And somebody else has come and told me like minutes later for that painting that the ecstasy of her dance is stopping the bombs.
Ah.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
So I think the latter would be probably my mother. She would try to stop it. Or, some of us don't know what is coming at us and, that's life. And so but she would have the power to kind of take it and just maybe turn it around. I don't know, I haven't mastered it, and she's not there with us anymore, but I would call her up and she would tell me it's going to be okay. And then it would be okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris, for the question. So is there, we got maybe time for another one if there is one. Yes, Danny.
I have a quick question. This is just an artist question. What is the medium you're working in? Is it watercolors, and how do you get the vibrancy with the reds and the oranges, especially?
Sure. I don't use watercolor because I feel there's less pigment and more binder in it. I use gouache, Holbein gouache. And I use it like a watercolor and I layer the colors. I also have started using some, in certain cases, I use fluid acrylics, which are less plastic-like and more opaque, like more matte finish. It's made by Golden, and it's called fluid acrylics. And you can mix them in certain ways with the gouache to make the colors more intense. But the gouache colors are very much more intense and have more pigment and less binder. And so traditionally in Indian miniature painting, they were all organic paints made, but I can't make them. I mean, it's not possible. And so, yeah, I use gouache and I use also 22 karat gold leaf. So
Yes, that's hard to work with.
yeah.
Well,
Thank
all right.
you.
If I see no other hands, Geraldo, do you want to say anything as we conclude?
No, just thank you so much. I think that this was a great discussion, lots of wonderful questions. Deborah, thanks for introducing us all. I remember when you sent me the email introducing Sonia's work to me. So I'm just very, very grateful to have been a part of this this morning's discussion, and look forward to continuing to see, Siona, what else you do with your work as you grow and continue to do more. So I will stay in touch and keep looking at your website to see what else
Absolutely.
you
Please,
do.
anybody who wants to send me their emails to be added to my newsletter, please email me. It's artsiona@gmail.com. If you want, I can write it.
And I do think you should have an exhibit further west. It's time for, I mean, come on now. Let's Midwest isn't west enough. So
Right.
I've shown in California, but yeah, I mean, where you guys are, if there's a museum interested, this show is actually going to travel for 1.5 years. There's a possibility Scarball Cincinnati might join in, but that show is available. It's a package show. It's after 2023, it's available to travel. So there's plenty of time, for venues to plan that since this show is happening. And then this way, all venues get to share the cost of the insurance and everything. So it becomes cheaper.
Yeah.
When it travels that way. As you know, Gerald,
We
to
don't-
involve
we
the
don't-
artist. Yeah.
At the
Yeah,
Nevada
yeah.
Museum of Art to hook
Yes.
up with.
Yeah, we need art like this out here.
I would love to come to you guys. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you propose it to the curator and, I'll be happy to talk to them. Somebody has also mentioned Namat for children and women in Israel and Cleveland Council. Yes. When I go to Cleveland in early 2023, I'll be there. So I would love to do something with that group too. Helene has suggested that. So absolutely. My email is there if anybody wants to be added on to my newsletter. It comes out about once a month, and for news about what I'm doing in my studio or whatever, please let me know and I'll be glad to add you on. Thank you so much. Thank you, Deborah, for introducing me to Rabbi Myra and Geraldine and everybody here, because
Thank you so much, Siona. This
Thank
has
you.
just been wonderful. Geraldo, thank you for the wonderful questions. Siona, so many of us just love your work, and now we get to add loving you. You are just an absolute delight, and this has been really fantastic. Thank you all who came today. This has been recorded, and Jeff will send something out so that we'll know how, if you want to go back and listen to the recording, you certainly can. Pay attention to the Sinai bulletin. The next one is going to be like the second week in January, and we're moving the time into the afternoon. And it will be Rabbi Sarah, and I think, barring how Rabbi Benjamin is doing health-wise, we think it will be Rabbi Sarah and another member of our congregation on LGBTQ and gender issues. And all of that within the Jewish community. So pay attention to those. And again, Siona, we are so grateful for you. And thank you all, everyone who came today. And I think with that, we will sign off, and may everyone have a wonderful last night of Hanukkah. And in our own ways, let's keep bringing light into this world in whatever color we bring it. Thank you all.
thank you so much.